As preppers, we try to do a risk analysis. What's the most likely to happen? And then we come up with a plan. Do we need supplies? Do we need skills? What do we need to do to mitigate that threat? And then hopefully we take action. I just wish the United States and other countries of the world would have more of a prepper mindset. Now, granted, the United States has done a lot of research into possible threats and paid a lot of money for it. But often, nothing happens after that report is done and it sits on a shelf gathering dust. Let me give you some examples. And let's look at the pharmaceutical industry. Jane Woodcock, MD, the director of the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, testified before the House Committee on Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Health in October 2019. And this was before COVID was even known. Her topic was safeguarding pharmaceuticals in a global economy. And let me read you a little of her testimony. The United States, through its investment in biomedical research, has become a world leader in drug discovery and development, but is no longer in the forefront of drug manufacturing. Historically, the production of medicines for the U.S. population had been domestically based. However, in recent decades, drug manufacturers have gradually moved out of the United States. This is particularly true for manufacturers of active pharmaceutical ingredients, which they call APIs. And that's the actual drugs that then are formulated into tablets, capsules, injections, etc. As of August 2019, only 28% of the manufacturing facilities making these APIs to supply U.S. were in our own country. So by contrast, 72% was overseas, and guess where 13% of them were? That's right, in China. And FDA's data show that the number of registered facilities making APIs in China more than doubled between 2010 and 2019. And one of the reasons drug companies have done this is cheaper labor and more relaxed environmental standards, which kind of bothers me because, they're not allowed to dump the toxic chemicals here in the U.S., but they just go into another country and drop those toxic chemicals there. So a lot of this is about pharmaceutical greed, because I have not seen prices drop as they have actually offshored a lot of the drug production. And in that report, it said that these drug companies save 40% by producing them in a country other than the United States or the European nations. Again, where are those cost savings going? I think they are going into bonuses for the CEOs of pharmaceutical companies and very greedy stock investors. Now, India also manufactures a lot of those APIs. And you remember what happened this spring? They imposed a blanket export ban on a malaria drug touted by Trump as possible therapy for coronavirus. They were going to keep it in their own country for their own people, which, who could blame them? But look what that does to us in the U.S. And of course, there's also been numerous problems with quality. Sometimes the drugs are not meeting the quality standards that we require, and that could even result in death. So drugs manufactured in China and elsewhere might not be scrutinized as heavy as if they were made here in our own country. Now, obviously this was before COVID, and it showed we already had a problem with drug shortages occasionally. Well, now that we got COVID, we've got even more of a problem. So what's the prepper solution? Well, if you're an individual prepper, it's probably you're going to try to stockpile as many drugs as you can. But for most of us, that doesn't work. But as a country, I think we really have to closely scrutinize the percentage of drugs made in other areas and bring back a high percentage of those drugs to be manufactured right here in the good USA. Until COVID, I didn't even know we had a strategic national stockpile. It was created after 9/11, and it stockpiled medical supplies and equipment that could help supplement state and local public health emergencies. However, the 2009 H1N1 flu epidemic depleted 85 million N95s from the stockpile that were never replenished, and funding was repeatedly cut. But again, SNS managers, before this even happened, said this was a problem, wrote wonderful reports, said we have to replenish the stock. And again, it fell on deaf ears. So let's hope that's still not true. So the proper solution would be we need to replenish and expand the amount of goods in our strategic national stockpile. Well, there's some moves afoot to do just that. The U.S. House Energy and Commerce Committee recently approved the bipartisan Strengthening America's Strategic National Stockpile Act of 2020, which is H.R. 7574. And the purpose of the act is to strengthen the strategic national stockpile and boost the domestic manufacturing of medical supplies to fight the pandemic. Let's hope it passes the Senate too. And again, bringing production to essential medical supplies back to the United States. I mean, look what happened with masks. So President Trump used the Defense Production Act for manufacturing of ventilators in the U.S., but he did not do that same for PPE masks. And of course, this shortage was also caused by hospitals not stockpiling. Instead, they were doing just-in-time inventory. And we had a problem, and we still have a problem with enough PPE for our healthcare workers. And believe it or not, the HHS funded the invention of a machine that could make 1.5 million N95, but when the design was completed, no further funding. So that design just sits on a shelf. See what I mean when I say we do a good job of kind of researching and seeing what needs to be done. It's just then, no funding goes to it. Now, 3M has received a grants issued by the U.S. Department of Defense to expand their U.S. production of N95 masks. The Department of Defense, in coordination with the Department of Health and Human Services, has also signed a $126 million contract award to 3M for the increased production of 26 million N95 medical grade masks per month. And that was supposed to start last month, but I think maybe it's not starting till this month. Unfortunately, that's still not enough. And we wouldn't have so much problem with this pandemic if the government would have given everyone an N95 mask to wear, because that will protect the person wearing it and protect others. But that wasn't done. In fact, our government initially said, you don't need to wear masks. Can't say any more about that. You know what worries me? I'm worried when the pandemic is gone and, people have another emergency to worry about. This will all kind of settle and production will go back to China. And if it happens again, which chances of a pandemic happening again are good, we'll be in the same trouble as now. Now, because of all the disruptions to food and supplies that we experienced in the spring, the just-in-time type of inventory system did not work. And to make it worse, here in Michigan, we depend a lot on migrant workers to actually harvest produce. Well, if enough workers of them get sick, then food doesn't get harvested and it just dies in the field. So I think companies are looking at different solutions. Like I said, for earlier this week for Thanksgiving, our stores had warehoused everything and they had all the supplies you would need. There was not going to be any shortages here because they weren't doing just in time. They were storing things since July in a warehouse. So what's the proper solution here? We need to shift from just in time to just in case. So my wish is we will learn lessons for this pandemic and not create the same ones going forward. Bring more production of essential drugs and supplies back to the United States. Have essential food supplies and other supplies be warehoused once again. These are just my thoughts. If you have other thoughts, how you'd like your country to think more like a prepper, comment below. As always, please subscribe and share the knowledge, and stay safe.